Guys, here in the secret stealth cave, we're going to have a close look now at the exact measurements of the Gen 1 compared to the Gen 2. Now, clearly this is a physically larger bike, but just how much larger is it? Now, we already know the difference in weight. 75.5 on this one versus 58 kilos on this one. But let's have a close look at these comparison measurements. So what about standover height? Is 760. Let's have a look at Gen 1. 760. And this one is also 760. Now the body size on these is somewhat different too. So the thickest part through to this seat edge here will go from that edge through to this edge. And we're looking at 230 on the frame edge. Over here on Gen 2, this time looking at 270. So it's 40mm thicker through, but this does have the 25 amp hour battery as opposed to my Gen 1 with a 20 amp hour battery. Distance here to this joint at the bottom, so length there, we're looking at, I'm going to call that 340. Looking at 430. So quite a big difference in this length that way on the Gen 2 bike. On Gen 1, my bike, we're looking at a wheelbase of 1210 millimeters. And over here, wow, this one 1340mm, so a fair bit longer overall. Pedal clearance, we've got 170 right there on Gen 2. Pedal clearance on my Gen 1 is, I'm going to say 170 because my bike's leaning over slightly more than Gen 2 here in the shed. Now, what about ground clearance? So ground clearance on my Gen 1 bike, we're looking at, I'm going to call that 320, 330 when the bike's standing up, upright. And over here on Gen 2, we're actually a lot less at 280. So 280 ground clearance on the bigger. On this bike we have a choice of shock mount. There you'll see 3 bolts in there. This mount can be taken off, spun around, and that will change the height that this bike sits and therefore ground clearance. Okay, measuring from the ground up, following the angle of the forks. Following the angle of the forks up through on Gen 1, top of the forks, I'm going to call that 1130. Over here on Gen 2, we're looking at 1170. Vertical height 940. Distance from headstand to seat post, I'm going to call that 570. And over here, head stem to seat post, wow, 640. Alright guys, so there's our look at the Gen 1 and Gen 2 comparison for measurements and sizing. Yeah, physically the Gen 1 is clearly smaller and the Gen 2 is even wider as well in here too. You can feel the weight when you're riding the Gen 2 at the 75.5 kilos that we have here. You can definitely feel the extra weight in that bike riding, but once you are moving along fast, it is very stable, very comfortable, fairly plush. The suspension does work very well with that weight. The inertia actually helps it in some ways. My lighter bike is just a little bit more flickable, but a lot of fun on the Gen 1, and always going to be very happy with that. So there you go, guys. Gen 1, Gen 2 specification comparison.